Remember when buying a TV meant filling out a tiny form at a counter and watching a light board flash your number? Before online shopping, before Amazon Prime, Canada had its own electronic empires. Consumers distributing catalogs stacked on coffee tables, Radio Shack battery cards in every wallet, future shop flyers thick as novels hitting doorsteps every Sunday morning. These weren't just stores, they were Saturday rituals, first job memories, and the backdrop to every family tech upgrade. You'd circle items in pen, argue about which VCR had better features, and wait in lines that snaked past rows of boom boxes. Today we're powering up 10 lost Canadian electronic stores that only true Canadians remember. Let's start where the dream began: consumers distributing. The catalog counter concept launched in 1957 and peaked at roughly 243 stores across Canada by the 80s. This was shopping stripped to its essence. No browsing showrooms, no impulse buys. You sat at home flipping thin newsprint pages filled with grainy photos, stereos, cameras, toys, small appliances. Each item had a number. You'd write it down, drive to the nearest location, fill out a form at the counter, and wait. The wait was everything. You'd watch the light board above the counter, dozens of numbers cycling through red and green lights. When yours flashed green, you'd walk up and staff would emerge from the back warehouse carrying your item in a box. Sometimes they'd return empty-handed. Out of stock, sorry, try another location. The system was efficient on paper, but frustrating in practice. You couldn't touch the product before buying. You couldn't compare models side by side. You had to trust the catalog description and hope. For families on budgets, though, consumers distributing delivered. Prices were competitive because overhead was low. No expensive showroom displays, minimal floor staff, just warehouse space and counter workers. Through the 70s and 80s, those catalogs became household fixtures. Kids circled toys for Christmas lists. Teens marked stereo systems they'd buy with first job money. Parents planned appliance upgrades months in advance. Let's jump to the store that felt like it was everywhere: Radio Shack. Except here's the thing most Canadians don't realize. Radio Shack in Canada wasn't quite Radio Shack. It operated under Intertan, a Canadian parent company that licensed the name and branding. For decades, that distinction didn't matter. You walked into a mall, saw that red and white sign, and knew exactly what you'd find inside: walls of batteries, answering machines, RC cars, cable adapters, and those DIY electronics kits that taught a generation of kids how circuits worked. Radio Shack Canada peaked in the 70s through the 90s with hundreds of locations. The stores were small, efficient, staffed by people who actually knew what a resistor did. You'd go in needing one specific adapter, and the employee wouldn't just point. They'd walk you through compatibility, suggest alternatives, maybe upsell you on a battery club membership that genuinely saved money if you had kids burning through AAs and Game Boys. But in 2005, everything changed. Legal battles over branding led to Intertan losing the Radio Shack name. Stores rebranded as The Source by Circuit City, later just The Source, eventually sold to Bell. The products stayed similar, but the vibe shifted. It wasn't your neighborhood electronics counter anymore. It became a phone and plan kiosk with some gadgets on the side. The Radio Shack name Canadians knew disappeared, even though stores with different signs remained. The real magic of those Radio Shack years wasn't the products, it was the accessibility. You didn't need to drive to a big box warehouse. There was one in your plaza next to the dry cleaner across from the food court. You'd stop in on your lunch break, grab what you needed, and be out in 5 minutes. That convenience died slowly, killed by online shopping and the shift toward fewer, larger retail spaces. Head west, and the name that dominated was A&B Sound. Founded in 1959 in Vancouver, it started as a small hi-fi shop and grew into a British Columbia retail powerhouse. By the 80s and 90s, A&B Sound stores were multi-floor temples to audio and video. You'd walk into the flagship location on Seymour Street and be hit by walls of TVs playing the same movie trailer, racks of CDs organized by obscure subgenres, and bins of budget discs priced to move. A&B Sound was famous for aggressive pricing, sometimes too aggressive. They'd undercut everyone, including themselves, running promotions that brought crowds but razor-thin margins. For music lovers and home theater geeks, though, it was paradise. You could spend hours flipping through jazz imports, comparing receiver specs, or watching sales staff demos surround sound systems that cost more than used cars. The chain expanded beyond Vancouver into other Western cities, but the strategy that made them popular, low prices, huge selection, became unsustainable. When Future Shop and Best Buy entered the market with even larger stores and bigger purchasing power, A&B Sound couldn't keep up. By 2008, the company filed for bankruptcy. The flagship closed. The bins of $5 CDs vanished. Another piece of Canadian retail history packed into boxes and auctioned off. What made A&B Sound special wasn't just what they sold, it was how they sold it. Staff were enthusiasts, not script readers. They'd argue with you about whether analog or digital sounded better. They'd recommend albums based on what you already owned. It was shopping as conversation, retail as community. That model couldn't survive the big box era, but for decades it thrived. Telling and preparing this video took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the video. Then came the store that defined Canadian electronics retail for an entire generation, Future Shop. Founded in Vancouver in 1982, Future Shop didn't invent the big box electronics model, but it perfected the Canadian version. By 1990, it was the #1 electronics retailer in the country. The formula was simple: massive warehouse-style stores, aggressive weekend sales called door crashers, and flyers so thick they required their own section in the Sunday paper. You didn't just go to Future Shop, you planned for it. Saturday mornings, families would show up before opening, lineups snaking around the building, everyone clutching flyers with circled deals. The doors would open, and it was controlled chaos. Rows of big-screen TVs, entire walls of VCRs, aisles dedicated to emerging technologies like CD players and early computers. Sales staff in blue shirts roaming the floor, some helpful, some clearly working on commission, and a bit too eager. Future Shop defined the 90s tech shopping experience. You'd compare models in person, argue with your spouse about whether you really needed surround sound, then load a TV box the size of a refrigerator into your trunk. The flyers were events. People would grab them Thursday night and spend the week planning what to buy. Sunday became electronics shopping day across Canada, a ritual Future Shop built and owned. But ownership changed everything. In 2001, American giant Best Buy bought Future Shop, but kept both brands running separately. For years, this worked. Future Shop stayed Future Shop. Best Buy stayed Best Buy, sometimes right across the parking lot from each other. Then, in 2015, Best Buy decided the overlap no longer made sense. In one swift move, they closed or converted all Future Shop locations. The red signs came down. The brand Canadians grew up with disappeared overnight, replaced by the blue and yellow Best Buy logo. The death of Future Shop hit different than other closures. It wasn't bankruptcy or slow decline. It was a corporate decision, calculated and final. One day you had your local Future Shop, the next it was Best Buy, selling the same stuff. The products didn't change, but the identity did. For a generation of Canadians, Future Shop wasn't just a store. It was where you bought your first DVD player, your first flat screen, your first laptop. Losing the name felt like losing a piece of shared history. While Future Shop dominated English Canada, Quebec had its own champion, Adventure Electronics, or Aventure Electronique, depending on which side of the sign you read. Founded in 1989 and headquartered in Quebec, Adventure Electronics understood something other chains didn't. Serving Quebec meant more than translating signs. It meant bilingual staff, French-first marketing, and products that appealed to Quebec households specifically. At its peak, Adventure Electronics operated 143 stores across Quebec and Ontario, making it the third-largest consumer electronics retailer in Canada. The chain ran two formats: larger Adventure Electronique warehouse stores and smaller Adventure Boutique locations in shopping centers. The strategy mirrored Future Shop's big box approach, but with a distinctly Quebec flavor. Grand opening events featured balloon arches, local celebrities, and promotions tied to Quebec culture and holidays. For a few years, Adventure Electronics gave Future Shop real competition in Quebec. They knew the market, spoke the language literally and figuratively, and built loyalty through community presence. But retail is brutal, and by the mid-90s, cracks were showing. Future Shop began an aggressive expansion into Quebec, bringing bigger budgets and broader supplier relationships. Adventure Electronics couldn't match the scale. In 1998, banks pulled financing as losses mounted. On November 16th, Adventure Electronics filed for bankruptcy. All 143 stores closed within months. Employees lost jobs. Customers lost their local option. Quebec's homegrown electronics giant vanished, leaving Future Shop and Best Buy to fill the void. The bilingual signs came down, replaced by English-dominant branding from chains with head offices in Toronto or Minneapolis. Adventure Electronics proved something important. Regional identity mattered in Canadian retail. A chain built for Quebec, run by Quebecers, speaking Quebec's language, could thrive. But it also proved that identity alone couldn't overcome capital and scale. When the money dried up and competitors pressed harder, even strong brands crumbled fast. Before the big box era, stereo stores ruled. And in Western Canada, no name hit quite like Kelly's Stereo Mart. Starting in the late 60s in Vancouver, Kelly's built its reputation selling high-quality audio equipment, turntables, amplifiers, receivers, and speakers. These weren't just stores, they were destinations for people serious about sound. Kelly's Stereo Mart expanded through the 70s and 80s into cities like Calgary and Toronto. The Calgary location opened August 1, 1979, complete with newspaper ads promising unbeatable prices on imports and domestic brands. Inside, you'd find rows of equipment, demo stations where you could actually listen before buying, and staff who'd debate speaker placement and amplifier wattage like it mattered, because to them it did. The store also sold records, which made sense. You weren't just buying a turntable, you needed something to play on it. Kelly's Stereo Mart became a Saturday hangout for music lovers and audiophiles, people who'd spend hours comparing sound quality, asking about new releases, or just browsing bins of vinyl looking for deals. But the 90s brought seismic shifts. Future Shop and chains like 2001 Audio Video offered broader selection and lower prices by buying in bulk. The era of the specialized stereo shop, small, focused, expert-driven, couldn't compete. Kelly's Stereo Mart locations began closing. The brand faded. By the late 90s, it was gone, another casualty of retail consolidation. What Kelly's Stereo Mart represented was a different shopping philosophy, depth over breadth, expertise over efficiency. You didn't go to Kelly's for a toaster or a TV. You went for audio, and you went knowing the person helping you cared about what they were selling. That model worked for decades until it didn't. Some stores weren't chains, they were pillars. Chromemer Radio in Toronto fits that category perfectly. Opened in 1957 on Harbord Street by Paul Chromemer, the store served Toronto families for 55 years. In 1974, Chromemer Radio moved to 420 Bathurst Street, where it became a neighborhood fixture. Chromemer Radio sold TVs, audio equipment, and appliances, Basic stuff, but essential. This was where families bought their first color television, where students picked up affordable stereos, where locals came when something broke and needed fixing. The store wasn't flashy. It didn't run door-crasher sales or plaster buses with ads. It survived on reputation, service, and being there when people needed it. Through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Chromemer Radio watched Toronto change around it. The neighborhood shifted. Big box stores opened miles away. Online shopping arrived. Yet Chromemer Radio stayed, serving customers who valued personal service over price wars. Paul Chromemer knew his clients by name. He'd remember what you bought 5 years ago and suggest compatible upgrades. But by 2012, the math stopped working. Rising commercial rents, declining foot traffic, and the reality that fewer people needed in-person help buying electronics made continuing unsustainable. After 55 years, Chromemer Radio closed. The blue sign came down. The Bathurst Street location, once filled with CRTs and cables, became something else. Chromemer Radio's closure didn't make national news. No one outside Toronto likely noticed. But for the neighborhood, it was the end of an era, a reminder that even the most reliable, most loved local businesses can't outlast economics forever. The mid-90s brought a new player, Computer City, a big box chain focused entirely on computers and software. While other stores sold TVs and stereos, Computer City went all in on the PC boom. Rows of beige towers, aisles of boxed software, launch day events for Windows 95 complete with balloons, demos, and lines of people eager to upgrade. Computer City operated 7 Canadian stores before being sold in 1998. The chain was part of a broader American expansion, but Canada represented a smaller, riskier market. When CompUSA bought Computer City in 1998, they sold the Canadian locations to Future Shop, which eventually closed or converted them. The Computer City brand disappeared from Canada entirely. What made Computer City interesting wasn't longevity, it barely lasted, but timing. The chain arrived during the home computer revolution, when families were buying their first PCs, when software came in massive boxes with instruction, manuals thicker than novels. For a brief window, Computer City represented the future. Then the future moved faster than they could follow, and suddenly, big box computer stores felt obsolete. Not every electronics store sold new gear. Some thrived on surplus, oddities, and the kind of random components hobbyists craved. Active Surplus in Toronto was exactly that kind of place. Opened in 1962 on Queen Street West, Active Surplus was a 2-floor treasure cave of motors, LEDs, cables, switches, and things you didn't know existed until you saw them. The store became a cult destination for OCAD art students, DIY electronics enthusiasts, and anyone building weird projects. You'd walk in with no plan and leave with a bag of parts you didn't need but couldn't resist. Handwritten labels marked bins. Staff knew where everything was, even though the organization system looked like controlled chaos to outsiders. Active Surplus survived decades by being exactly what it was: cheap, cluttered, and endlessly interesting. But by 2015, rising downtown Toronto rents made the Queen Street location unsustainable. The store closed, though the spirit lived on in a smaller location under a different name. The original Active Surplus, with its orange gorilla logo and bins of mystery components, became another memory. Finally, we hit the wildest names in Canadian electronics retail: Crazy Crazy and Multitech Warehouse Direct. These weren't refined brands. They were loud, aggressive, price war gladiators that fought for market share through the 80s and 90s with promotions so aggressive they bordered on chaotic. Crazy Crazy started the madness, running dozens of stores across multiple provinces. The name alone told you what to expect: bold signage, constant sales, no-interest financing deals plastered everywhere. Multitech Warehouse Direct split off from Crazy Crazy in a legal dispute, creating two competing discount chains with similar strategies and confusing overlapping histories. Both chains thrived during the 80s and 90s audio-video boom. Canadians wanted boomboxes, VCRs, and big speakers, and Crazy and Multitech promised the lowest prices. But the business model was fragile. Supplier tensions, inventory problems, and shifting retail landscapes caught up with them. Multitech entered receivership in 1996. Crazy limped along, with its last major stores closing by 2009. What Crazy and Multitech represented was pure 90s retail energy, volume over refinement, price over service, chaos over order. They weren't built to last, and they didn't. But for a decade, they were everywhere, shouting deals and moving product faster than anyone thought possible. If this trip down memory lane hit you right in the nostalgia, smash that like button and subscribe so you never miss our deep dives into forgotten Canada.